Welcome to GarageCast. This is going to be a very interesting episode, dude, because you and I are steeped in a certain manner of business, and I think I'm giving a speech at NPDA about basically are we prepared for the future, right? Because I think we've been doing business for so long a certain way. I think everybody, it's not just power sports, it's not just our business, it's just everything in the world right now is just changing exponentially every day. And I remember, I don't know, a couple of years back, one of the things I was talking about in this speech was, it was like, man, year to year, we're a lot smarter from year to year. We're a lot smarter than the generation behind us. And then it's month to month and day to day. And it's literally now second to second. We're getting crazy smart. So this is going to be a very interesting episode. Dantzler, how did you source these guys? Did they find you, or hold
on? This is new to me. You're giving a futurist speech? Like, who's listening to Tony Gonzalez about the future of any damn thing?
Did you guys even hear that? Because Sam still has internet from the old ages. Dantzler, were you trying to say something snappy about me and nobody heard it?
I was, and I'm going to let it go. It was good too. Damn it!
I bet
it was very good. No, I was just commenting.
Put your phone on the modem. Put your phone on the modem and speed up the chipmunks.
Tony, keep in mind, recently Grok 4 just came out, right? And they're saying that's as close to threatening human beings as or our business model certainly as can be out there. So no, I agree with what you said. I just don't know if you're the mouthpiece for it. The good news is we have multiple people on this podcast, so you'll do less talking on this one. So I'm very excited to introduce our guest here.
This is a show for anybody that has something that they want to say. It's going to be full of people with a lot of energy, CEOs, OEMs, vendors.
Best practice ideas in this industry and of neighboring industries.
We're talking to people that are on the cutting edge of processes, management.
Serial entrepreneurs, authors. We really have a feast of all different types of senior level people.
A cornucopia, as it were.
A plethora, maybe. Grab a pen, grab a cup of coffee, and have a seat. Start writing. This is
GarageCast. Rowan, Mockler, Chris Howard, you guys are the founders of Ekho, which we're going to be talking about today. Mike Cunningham, you're doing business development for these guys. You've been in the industry quite some time. We'll get to you in a sec here. But Rowan, let's start with you. How did you meet Chris, and when did you decide that you guys could possibly be business partners in this venture?
Sure. First of all, Tony, Sam, thanks so much for having us. Excited to share our story here. But yeah, to your question. So I met Chris on one of the first days of college at Stanford, actually. So we both met up there. We ended up studying computer science together and became very close friends within the first couple of weeks of school. We ended up outside of schoolwork, working together on a bunch of different projects. So the types of things where, we would force the friends around us to download the silly app that we had made and get feedback. And, we did that about 4 or 5 times, honestly, before we ended up graduating. And I think probably at some point during the very first one, we realized that we could build things very quickly together. So I think it became evident over the course of college that we would start an enduring business together and build something together. We did, however, by the end of college, feel like it would make most sense to go out into industry and get a taste of what good looked like before going off on our own. And so we did end up doing that. But that was ultimately kind of how we ended up de-risking our co-founder relationship, so to speak, and learning that we could build things really fast together.
And this app that you had your friends in college over at Stanford, Tony, that's in California, by the way. He's not so good with geography. This was the precursor to what you have now with Ekho, or was this something totally different?
Yeah, good question. So the beginnings of Ekho and really the kernel of the idea was only something we started thinking about, I would say, strictly post-college. The things we were building during college took many different shapes and forms. So it was social apps that allowed you to send movie sound bites to friends, or, in another case, we built a mentorship marketplace for international high school students that wanted to study in the US, that helped them connect with US college students. So no, it certainly was an Ekho, but we see everything we built up until Ekho as being like a very important stepping stone where we, got to build together.
Yeah. I like that you guys went out to cut your teeth in some other businesses as well, which I'm sure we'll hear about when we get to the Ekho story. I did, and if I'm out of order, please let me know. Rowan, I'm going to come back to you here. But relative to the power sports and kind of what Ekho is in the power sports industry, you guys had identified something, and I'm going to use your quote that we talked about the other day on the phone, that power sports had no mature e-com solutions, right? So how'd you get to that conclusion, and why is e-com in the power sport industry or any major unit sales so complicated relative to e-com?
Good question. So I think taking a step back, Chris and I, when we started thinking about, what is this business that we're going to build? What industry is it going to be in? We noticed this trend that had happened in just about every large market where no matter how esoteric the industry is, there generally is, especially for physical commerce of any kind, there generally is a large company or a set of large companies that get built to simplify the transaction in an industry where the transaction is otherwise very fragmented, complicated, and in many cases not one that people believe can go fully online, fully digital. And so, some of the companies here, by the way, are things like Warby Parker for glasses, or Casper for mattresses, Wayfair for furniture, and the list goes on and on. And so Chris and I both have some familial ties to vehicle sales. So it made sense that we started, when we noticed this trend and we were studying some of the big businesses that had been built, we started to think about it in the context of vehicle sales. And we generally felt like auto, and many people in the industry say this, is about, 10, 15 years ahead from a technology standpoint. And there were some technologies there that felt like they'd successfully, for some parts of the transaction, stitched this otherwise very complicated transaction together. For non-car light duty vehicle sales, so specifically, power sports, golf cart, travel trailers, OPE, things like that, the reason we learned that they weren't there is because we went out and tried to buy something fully digital, whether it was a motorcycle or ATV. And at every layer of the strata within the value chain, whether it's at the aggregator level, so, the Trader Interactives of the world, or the website level, whether it's Dealer Spike or any of the others, at every level, even when you went into the dealership, it just felt so fragmented into these things we know of as, F&I, the financing, desking, titling and registration, all these different things. And that's when we learned, okay, there's an opportunity to build a big business here.
Yeah. So the thing that caught me is you say you guys both have some sort of background in vehicle sales. Is that through families? Is that through you did it at the boots on the ground level? Like how did you know? Because obviously you're speaking the right language, which is auto being 10 to 15 years ahead of what's going on. And another one that hit right off the bat is power sports, marine, RV, completely fragmented. Just, a billion different things to grab to make something come together that can't be organized. So what's your background on that?
Yeah, I'll kick us off there. So for me, my dad actually part-owned a dealership back in South Africa, which is where I'm from. And very similar, three-tier distribution model. So got a taste of that growing up. My family, perhaps as a result or, just incidentally, is also a big motorsports family. And so the notion, the practice of purchasing vehicles and or trading them in, et cetera, was something that, I got used to growing up. I'll speak for Chris here. I mean, one of the families he's very close with back in Atlanta is actually an investor in our company who own and operate a lot of the Chevrolet and classic car dealers out there. So.
Okay. Cool. Got it. So Chris, technologically, how has Ekho been able to stitch all the complicated parts of the vehicle sale together? We're talking about everything kind of being fragmented. What are some of the most complicated things you guys have needed to build out to make this vision come true?
Yeah, it's a good question, Tony. I I think it's helpful to maybe take a step back and think about what's involved in a vehicle sale, right? So generally in any sort of power sports vehicle sale or auto vehicle sale, you'll have secured financing and other kind of F&I products, titling and registration, insurance, fraud detection, and tax handling, right? Of course, you have logistics and there's some edge cases of trade-ins and some of those more niche cases. But by and large, those 5 kind of key elements are important to any sort of vehicle sale. In order to facilitate that, it's tricky because there's complexity that comes in 2 forms. First off is each of those 5 kind of pillars means you have to interact with legacy software kind of systems that don't really like play nice with other technology providers. So you can think of on the lending side, you have LMSs and LOSs. You have the DMS provider for dealerships. On the titling and registration side, you're interacting with state portals. All of these things don't communicate well with one another. So that's a really challenging technical problem to solve. You then have just the raw number of permutation counts, right? So when you think about, the components of a vehicle sale, those 5 pillars that I mentioned, they really vary by region. Titling and registration, insurance, tax, F&I rules, and the vendors that are playing within those kind of domains, they all vary by region. So supporting kind of sales in all 50 states means that you have to internalize and solve for like these tens of thousands of different purchase workflows that all depend on the location in which a vehicle, in which a buyer is located. So I would say those are kind of the most interesting problems that we've faced when it comes to stitching together these different a seamless buying journey. So we've leaned heavily into AI to establish effectively universal APIs across lending, insurance, and titling and registration that have allowed us to really like standardize how we kind of connect with these dozens of different technology providers in each of the domain. And I think a helpful like example here is in auto, Route One is a fantastic software provider. They are a single software connector to all of these different lenders. In power sports, there isn't a Route One for power sports. So for us, to be able to integrate with all of these different lending solutions, we've effectively had to build out a Route One for the lenders who operate in power sports. And that's just one of those verticals. So for us to provide this like seamless experience that tackles all of those different pillars from lending to F&I to titling and registration, we've had to build out a lot of complex integrations with different kind of legacy systems. On the tail end of it, now you kind of look back and see what we've accomplished. We have a 50-state multi-vehicle vertical title and registration support. We have in-state and out-of-state tax handling and reporting on behalf of dealers. We have a end-to-end holistic fraud detection system that leverages AI in really interesting ways. All of these things have taken a really long time to build and allows us to kind of facilitate this really seamless experience. So those are just a couple. I could speak about this for a while, but hopefully that gives you a sense.
Yeah, Chris, really quick, I'll follow up on that. You talk about all of the LMS, you're talking about DMS, you're talking about CRMs, the whole 9 yards, and if they don't play well together. I understand on the state level and dealing with titling, but do they not play well with each other because it's designed that way? Or is it that, we built it and wrote it on a platform in our own manner and somebody else's platform is written differently? Sometimes it just seems as though the dealers have really told us that, there's walls built around the kingdom on purpose and it just doesn't want to talk to anything else. Is it kind of by design?
It's a good question. I think it's probably a nuanced answer. So you look at a lot of the legacy solutions. One, they were built originally back in the 70s and 80s. So like the infrastructure and foundation for a lot of these systems are built such that by nature, they're pretty incompatible with one another. Second, they're also like built to cater to the traditional workflow of in-person purchasing where you have an F&I agent and you have the salesperson, so that the existing technology is a better reflection of how vehicle sales have been to date rather than what is the most streamlined way vehicle sales should be. So they're not kind of built to interact with one another nicely. And so that's one perspective. The other perspective is I do think there's probably some truth to this idea that these systems, could there have been more investment to make these systems play nicer with one another over the last decade or two? Absolutely. There is certain incentives from these technology companies to, keep that kingdom isolated to a certain extent. And we've spent a lot of time and effort building relationships with these different organizations to allow us to interact with them and help facilitate this really seamless experience.
Well, just to comment on that, but I get what you're saying, the keys to the kingdom, but when the kingdom's all one kingdom, let's go to Harley Davidson for the last 20 years. And when we get Mike on here, Mike's a longtime industry guy, but Mike, you can speak to this as well, but whether it was the Unix-based Lightspeed system that went to Windows-based, and then how many updates of Talon have we seen come through and software systems, and they're all under the one empire, right? And they can't figure out how to get these talking to each other. Tony grabbed most of my follow-up question with his, and I think your answer was great, but I just think about there have been so many people who've come along to try to put all these systems together to reduce the redundancy of the input and the cost and all this kind of stuff. And they just haven't been able to do it. And I don't know if it's that you guys are young guns, both computer programmers, and you have a mindset that maybe the sales guys trying to build some of the other systems didn't have, or don't, as I should say, because I'm in that window. But if you guys can pull this off, I think it's going to be I think this is going to be incredible. And you've got a gorgeous guy on your team here who might help you pull this thing off. Let me introduce Mike Cunningham, the best looking cat on the call. He's in Las Vegas right now. I guess you're trying not to move because it's too damn hot, or are you just the joints don't move, or what's going on there?
I'm stuck. So yeah, I love it. I've been here 25 years and don't plan to move, to be honest with you. So it's all good.
Mike's if you guys don't know Mike, he's been in the power sports industry as a dealer. He was a Lemco dealer for a number of years. He was a Triumph. I think you were there when Triumph was trying to figure out the NG40, the next generation 40-year-old, right? And what that white glove experience looked like. That may have been after you with Matt Sheehan, who came in. But we've been trying to solve this problem about the internet sales for a long time, and Mike's obviously gone through it on many levels. But even back with the Triumph days, we were trying to figure out how that multi-channel sale was going to work out, and Mike, you spent a lot of time with Zero Motorcycles, a very cutting edge, electric motorcycle company. So I don't know what you said to sell them on bringing you out of retirement that you may have something to offer, but how did that go down? Tell us.
Well, I can tell you the sale to them was a lot easier than the sale to my wife, because when I retired in mid 24 from Zero after kind of a significant wind down time with them, I hung a shingle out and I was going to do some advisory work. And I learned about Ekho and actually worked really hard to find some connection to where I could get a phone call with Rowan and Chris. So, after 50 plus years in the motorcycle business, primarily I started out sweeping floors at dealerships for discounts on parts when I was 15, and sales and college there in Spartanburg, South Carolina, to having the opportunity to buy a Kawasaki dealership with family in 1976. So I've been in the industry, like I said, a long time, but I've also, those first years were a real big struggle for me, but the kind of the change in my trajectory in the industry was learning about Ed Lemco and joining a 20 club and finding out, learning what good really was, and understanding what other people were doing to progress their businesses and to progress the industry as a whole. And to me, it was, Ed used to say a lot, he was a student of the industry, and I took that to heart. And during my 20 years as a dealer in Fayetteville, North Carolina, outside of Fort Bragg, I tried to do everything I could to make the store as efficient as I could, learning from my peers in the 20 club. And that philosophy I took into the OEM side when I went to the dark side and started working as a VP for various OEs. But But having the opportunity when I found these guys and learned about what they were trying to do and saw how it would fit and how it could accelerate the power sports business as a whole, filling gaps that we have, not just from a process and efficiency standpoint, but also, potentially bringing in, customers that we don't necessarily touch, and I'm sure that, Rowan and Chris will talk about that, but I feel really lucky to have found these guys. I got to hang out initially with Chris at EICMA, and then of course both of them at AIM, and ended up going from like being a semi-advisor to being a team member has really changed a lot of things in my life. But I love it, and it's great working with these guys. And you talked about being able to stitch stuff together. I've watched some of this stitching, and dude, it's friggin' awesome. What they've been able to do. And I really do believe it's because of their background, their family ties to the industry and understanding that, but also the inquisitiveness, and the asking of questions and bringing a variety of people in to talk to about some of the issues that we've experienced, so that they can hear it from dealers and from others within, to build something that's really, really friggin' awesome.
Yeah. Well, buddy, you've been around the block many times, and I mean that with the greatest of respect, like I used to say about Ed Lemko. So I'm truly excited that you guys found each other. I think this is going to be cool, and having you on their side is a great insight to what they don't maybe know about why we're 15 years behind auto.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, let me shift to you again. And that is that you guys, you purposely held off jumping into your business idea until you cut your teeth boots on the ground level. Why was that part of your thinking and your business model?
Yeah, I think, coming out of school, we both knew that we had a lot to learn before going into industry. I worked at Meta as an AI engineer for a bit, and then Rowan worked as a PM at Duolingo. And we both greatly respected these technology organizations and felt like we had a lot to learn from them. So yeah, I think for me in particular, when thinking about starting a technology company, there's a lot of opportunity to learn things like, what do the best technology companies in the world do when it comes to code reviews, and what are standards of excellence that we should bring into our own organization, and things of that nature. So, and also what are the types of people you want to surround yourself in a kind of organization? So I when reflecting on that experience, I think we learned a ton about how mature, kind of capable operations run. And, there are a number of things that we've brought into our lives here at Ekho, but I think it was with a degree of humility that we wanted to kind of spend some time in industry and learn from others who are more senior than us before kind of embarking on our own kind of journey here with Ekho.
Chris, let me follow up with that. Meta and Duolingo, and you mentioned three things, which I think any aspiring entrepreneur, if they could just get one, would be awesome. We want to be a best in class. It's not we want to make millions of dollars. We want to be best in class. You said, what is the standard of excellence that we're going to live by? What is our standards inside of excellence? And then you said who, which I think is a critical ingredient to all of it, right? We'll figure out all the other pieces later, but that is pretty impressive for a couple guys straight out of college. I'm interested in maybe what didn't work. You had alluded to there's some things that you brought over into Ekho, and maybe what were the top one or two things that really did work, and then give us one or two things that you're like, yeah, that's not going to fly over here in the power sports side.
Yeah, good question. I can think of a couple. So one thing that became readily apparent after spending time at these massive organizations that has quite literally, Meta has billions of users, is the dearth of data that you get. So, when you're making decisions at a company like Meta or Duolingo, where, you have hundreds of thousands of users, if not millions or billions of users, you're able to make every decision with so much data and analytics and A/B testing to justify that data, that the output is pretty much well known. When you transition to power sports, where the user base is, certainly not in the billions, at least in the US market. And we're having to make decisions every day about how our product should look, how folks should interact with our product. We don't have that like kind of the pleasure of having such like data informed decisions as we had at our previous companies. So that was something that was maybe a little bit of a wake up call for us over the first year or 2 years, starting the business, of having to trust our gut, having to interact with tons of dealers and manufacturers and everyone in the industry, and use that more like anecdotal experience to drive our insights rather than raw kind of analytics and numbers to drive those things. So that's one thing that jumps off the page for me. Rowan, I don't know. This is an interesting question. Do you have anything off the top of your head that was something that didn't work well that you perhaps became accustomed to at Duolingo?
I think you get at like an underlying theme of just the maturity of these larger companies, and I think how we had gotten used to a lot of structure, a lot of data, and a lot of structure specifically around processes, whether it's engineering, whether it's spec writing, PRDs. And I think we caught ourselves a couple of times being like a team of 3 or 4 and expecting that any new feature goes through a 1 page, then to a spec, then to designs, and then into a technical spec. And it's like, well, at the end of the day, what ended up happening, quite frankly, is we just built the thing and threw it out there and saw what happened and iterated. I mean, funny enough, now we're closer to 30 people, and we're starting to resemble those like bigger company processes, which I think are very valuable. But I think we were almost too early to try and jump into that world of structure at times.
Yeah.
What I will maybe say is a couple of things that we did port over that were successful, I think. I'd probably boil it down to 2. One is like an appreciation for the customer. I think at both Duolingo and Meta, they're both product-driven organizations. And it was never a question of whether we should talk to the customer. But I think we both found we saw within these like massive organizations how important and customer-centric they were. And that's something that we've certainly embodied here at Ekho, with making sure we're speaking with dealers on a daily basis and we're building products in the right direction. And then the second thing that I think particularly came out of Duolingo is like beautiful products win. So I don't know if you folks have played around with Duolingo, but it is a gorgeous product. And that's kind of what we want to do here at Ekho, is build technology that is just a delight to interact with. So anyway, it's also interesting to reflect on what are some of the positive things that we perhaps took over and continue to embody today at Ekho.
Sure. Yeah, I just think if you're not keeping score of that worked or that didn't, and then why did it work or why didn't it work, then you kind of lose your direction. So I'm glad to hear both sides of that.
Yeah, Rowan, let me follow up with you. Is you guys have raised over $17 million from the likes of JP Morgan, Winnebago, et cetera. What did they see, or what was the thing that caused them to open up their checkbooks and stroke some money to you guys?
Yeah, that's a good question, Tony. So let's see. I think there were some of the more basic things. By the time we were talking to investors for our Series A, which happened more recently, we had a ton of traction. So that was a big fortunate thing. So, and that was also with a very small team. So I think we were around 7 people at the time. We were already doing tens of millions of dollars in GMV on an annualized basis, and so that in and of itself was exciting. I think outside of that, it was also how, coming back to the question that was raised earlier of no mature e-commerce enablement layer within power sports and many of these non-car vehicle retail segments. When you add up the TAM, the total addressable market across all of these non-car light duty vehicle segments, you get somewhere north of $100 billion worth of sales volume that happens in the US alone every year. And you combine that with our business model and how much money we were making per deal in unison with the dealers that we were working with. And you could start to understand from JP Morgan and Winnebago and Y Combinator's perspective and Activant's perspective how big of a revenue opportunity there existed. So those are two things. I think the last one, which is really important, is these investors spoke to our clients and our shoppers, and I think that's an important thing because each of our clients, I am told, were singing our praises and really enjoy the product. Spoke to how much of a game changer it was, and same thing with our shoppers. We actually have a page on our website now dedicated to testimonials from shoppers who go through our checkout experience. And I think when you start to speak to them and realize like how valuable that experience was and how they swear by the idea that they're going to go back to a dealership that works with Ekho, you start to realize like how potentially big of an opportunity this is.
It's amazing.
Yeah, you're talking about the shoppers that you're hearing testimonials for, right? So the end user who's buying the product, you've got contracts with OEMs right now. You and I talked, Rowan, about how dealer centric you guys are. So you're playing in three different spaces, and can you either one of you guys, can you kind of lay that out for the listener out there? And then I've got another question for Chris right on the heels of that.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this. It's an important question. So something Chris and I postulated right at the beginning of when we started working on Ekho is that we almost counterintuitively, we knew that this product would really take off and generate the highest ROI when we started selling it directly to dealers. But ironically, we said to ourselves, we do not want to start by selling to dealers directly. Now, the reasoning is important. The reason per some of the observations we had made at the time was we'd just seen too many companies, technology companies, who started by going bottoms up, selling to dealers, and then kind of get stuck in the mud of becoming what we refer to as a point solution. So Sam, earlier you were talking about how just it's so fragmented, right? You've got something for your CRM, you've got something that helps you with titling and registration, you've got an F&I menu tool, you've got, you've got your aggregator who you're spending marketing dollars on, and TBD if that's working for you, you've got your website. Essentially, after studying many of these companies, we came to the conclusion that if we started by selling to dealers, that we would run the risk of just simply trying to extend the way they operate today, which I think many can argue could be better. And we would ultimately run into this divot of just building something very particular that extends their existing workflows. And that would ultimately end up being a point solution. So we ended up doing something very different. We said, let's sell to the manufacturer level. Let's obviously align incentives. Let's make sure we can turn dealer inventory by being integrated at the corporate website level of the manufacturer. But let's start there, because if we build it for a manufacturer who, isn't necessarily trained like a dealer is in the form of retail, then we'll almost end up building out everything a dealer would otherwise need to transact and complete a transaction. And under the hood, in the meantime, we'll be turning dealer inventory. We'll be upselling F&I to align incentives there. If we don't, we'd be cooked. And now we've gotten to a point where we are ready to sell directly to dealers after having kind of successfully launched what we call the Ekho Omni program, which is where we power checkout from the manufacturer's website, but ultimately are selling dealer inventory under the hood. We are now in a position where we can sell directly to the dealer a version of our product that works for them as essentially an extension of their website that encapsulates all these different tools. And I would argue the only reason we could do that is because we went into a place where we could just rethink what it meant to sell a vehicle from scratch and not design it to extend an existing set of workflows at the dealership.
I like that thought process. I just want the dealers to hear that you guys are very dealer centric. That was one of the first questions I asked you when we had our little prep talk. In fact, I asked Mike. Mike brought you guys to me, and I said, are they dealer advocates? Because it's got to be number one, right? Your framework for how you built it out was OEM first, and then you got to the dealer level with the idea of taking care of the end user. So just for clarification, I want to make sure I'm hearing this right. You guys clearly charge a fee for the dealers to use your software, but customers can go in and order a bike. Let's say Mike still had a dealership. I can go to Cunningham Power Sports as Sam Dantzler and order a motorcycle. And even if it's not in inventory, you and what you've built with the OEM can trigger an inventory on Mike's behalf. The sale, the bike comes to me. The sale goes to the dealer. The profit of the sale goes to the dealer, other than your fee, and the F&I, which you guys do behind the scenes, also goes to the dealer. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, by and large, everything you said there is exactly right. The ability to backfill from the OEM warehouse in the case that Mike's dealership doesn't have it is contingent upon us having a relationship with the OEM. And that's a very unique sales workflow that undoubtedly unlocks an incremental sale for a dealership, because they weren't going to make that sale beforehand if they didn't have the unit that the shopper was looking for. But yeah, exactly right. So the whole idea, and this is what just about every ounce of our engineering resources are going towards, is you can go to any dealer's website who's working with Ekho, and whether you're online sitting on your couch at home or you're on the showroom floor, you can make your way through what is ultimately a self-serve checkout, which may have been customized for your particular deal by a salesperson on the showroom floor if you're in person. And you can check out in about 5 to 10 minutes. Financing stipulations cleared, liability insurance validated and/or purchase net new, titling and registration documentation filled out and signed, sales docs executed. You can do that in 5 to 10 minutes versus the sometimes multi-day process that takes today.
What do you say? And listen, we have tons of dealers that listen to this podcast, and obviously they're very pessimistic about models that start with the manufacturer in mind first and then trickle down to them, just based off of history of how they've been doing business, and at times, and even in current models, adversarial, right? So how is it that you could clarify that it started? And I love what you're saying, is that we're literally trying to turn the model on its head. If we're going to start at the dealer level, and perhaps there's bad habits that we don't want to empower, we're trying to make this as user friendly for the customer buying the unit, as well as our customer, which is the dealer on Main Street America, that has to win in order for this whole thing, in order for manufacturers to win, in order for the customer buying the unit to win, the dealer has to win. Go farther into how this actually makes it better for XYZ Motorsports, Main Street USA.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I want to clarify the origin story a little bit. So we started OEM first for the reasons I mentioned to Sam. Now, these OEMs, we're talking at first about new entrant OEMs, tier 1, tier 2, no matter what tier dealer you weren't interested in stocking their product because it hadn't yet been proven out in the market. You were filled up with BRP, Yamaha, Ducati, whoever it was, kind of these more first-rate OEMs. And so you had this cohort of new wave OEM entrants. They were more often than not building electric versions of whatever vehicle out there, who were going to die as a company because they could not achieve distribution through traditional dealer channel. And so with that thing I postulated in mind a little earlier, this idea of if we want to build something truly transformational, we need to think about it from first principles and not extend existing workflows. We saw and met these new entrant OEMs who needed a distribution channel or else they were going to go out of business. We built the solution for them. Some licensing was needed on their end to go out and get done. And once we proved it out there, it was very clear that we could now make this a game changer for a standalone dealership. So to be very clear, when we sell into a standalone dealership, this is totally independent of any OEM we have or have worked with. We do or have worked with. And the game-changing part of it for a standalone dealership is a couple things. One, if I want to buy from Mike's dealership, let's say he still had one out in the Carolinas, my only option would be, even if I found the unit that I was interested in online, whether I started at the OEM site or at his dealer's website, the only way I could get my hands on it was I would have to go in person to that dealership. Maybe I could have done a pre-qualification online. Maybe I could have gotten a quote over the phone. And what we've learned from our data, from some of our earliest relationships, is that there are a ton of incremental sales out there from people who, for one reason or another, are not interested in going into the store. And the idea, or when faced with the choice of buying a new vehicle online or going into the store and buying it there, they just don't buy, right? Or sorry, when they lack the online option. And so the first big benefit for Ekho that Ekho provides to dealers is incremental sales. We allow you to have a full stack digital storefront on your website that allows you to transact on autopilot even when the dealership's closed. And it's also going to be high margin because we upsell your accessories intelligently. We have F&I pricing that's dynamic that gets upsold during checkout. So all those other revenue streams are still there. And then the other thing is just throughput at the dealer level. So, you've got a big back office at the dealership. Let's say it's a Saturday, it's a busy day. This tool allows you to get through deals in a fraction of the time that it would otherwise take me as a buyer to speak to a salesperson, get handed off to the F&I office, spend some time in the box there, then have my deal desked. And, all of a sudden I'm missing my documentation for my financing steps. So I need to go home. Ours is kind of truly digital and just increases throughput and ultimately lets you run a more efficient dealership. So those are two big things.
Those are huge. Tony and I talked last week about it could get frightening, right? It could all of a sudden yes, I think there's an incremental percentage of people who would rather do the transaction online. And quite frankly, I think you can't pinpoint exactly who that is, right? Because at some point I've had enough motorcycles in my life. The next one I know exactly what I want, exactly what feature I want. I still want my local bike shop to get the sale, all the above, but I just don't have time to go in the store. Then you have some people who just hate salespeople, don't want to deal with negotiations. They said that about the millennial generation. They absolutely hate negotiations. So maybe they want to do that, right? Maybe there's a new rider who thinks, well, I'm just going to get the entry level thing and give it to my kid until he's ready for something bigger. I just wonder, does that start stealing floor traffic away from the showroom? Because the idea, the experience at the dealership and what we create with the customer is so much more than just the transaction and the bike that they're buying. So we're going to have to be careful to see if more start going that route and away from the dealership, then all of a sudden we make part of the dealership experience irrelevant. And personally, I don't like that part.
Yeah, I don't either, Sam. But what I think of is this and I've been thinking about this a lot for this speech is, I guarantee you sometime 3, 5, 7, 10 years ago, grocery stores were saying, hell no, I don't want to have to delivered groceries and I don't want to have pickup outside our door, because that takes away the number one thing we're looking for, incremental sales based off of impulse, right? Oh, I'm going to grab, Dancer's grabbing Cheetos and I'm grabbing chocolate and right? That doesn't exist. But you know what? Here we are. And it is just a function of how we have to meet life where life is taking us. It's weird. It's weird for Sam and I and Mike, because Mike was selling side-by-sides to the Confederate Army back in the day, from his store in South Carolina. So this is totally crazy for the 3 older dudes, but this is where, if anything, we just have to meet customers where the customers want to meet, right? So I get it.
And I think really like what both of you said, and I want to touch on something Sam said and then something you said, Tony. So Sam, you mentioned this concern over what happens when everything happens that way. The thing I want to emphasize is the dealer product that we are now shipping and have integrated with a handful of dealers, soon publicly available, and we're excited about that. It's a tool, right? So you as a dealer owner ultimately define your own destiny. What do I mean by that? I mean, if you've got particular units, whether it's on a per brand level or it's an engine size thing that you don't want to sell online, maybe it's a new unit, hot unit, you can clear it in person, you're confident, your F&I guy is really excited to tack on some back-end products, etc. in our platform, it's as simple as saying, I don't want to enable online checkout for this. And so we simply become a lead capture mechanism for you there. We can still do some of the lead enrichment. We can do the pre-qualification, but that gives you a sense of how malleable the system is. And we're not bestowing anything upon a dealer. We're more so just giving you the toolbox to do all these different things with. So that's one thing I'll say. The other thing, to your point, Tony, just around, the incremental sales and this in time becoming like where things are going. You break it down to why are dealers concerned about online sales now? It tends to be because I make more money on an in-person sale, right? I can get someone in the box. I can upsell them on more back-end products. I can also have a negotiation so that, in the absence of that, I might lose a sale otherwise. I think the thing we've shown in the instances where we've operated is we can maintain all of those things and make sure at the end of the day, you're making just as much margin on the F&I. In many cases, dealers don't even have that. So that's just purely additive. I think negotiation, when you think about large language models, that's like something they're particularly good at, right? Is understanding the different levers involved in a negotiation, simulating that environment so that you can still more or less guarantee you'll get a deal when someone's not ready to pay full price. And I think the last thing I'll say is, big part of bottom line is warranty, servicing, parts and accessories. And really what you need to guarantee that for your dealership is making the sale in the first place. So if we can make you more sales, then that lifetime value of the customer, which can, if they're young and going to be a repeat purchaser, can be upwards of several $100,000. It's like ultimately like you just want to get in there first. And the last thing I'll add here is we know from data that with Ekho, versus traditional dealer sales, we sell to more first-time buyers, significantly younger buyers. They skew more female than traditional dealership kind of foot traffic. And they're also sometimes very nervous about their credit profile, right? They're nervous to go in person and get rejected in front of the F&I office and ultimately not be able to buy. So all of these things culminate in like, if you're not using this thing, you're losing out on sales for sure. And how you use it is totally up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just one additional note there. I think, Rowan shared that the primary reason dealers tend to want in-person sales is because of, kind of a reduction of the margin. I think the second piece there is, of course, like establishing that relationship with the customer. And I do want to emphasize that absolutely is maintained even in sales that are brought through the Ekho online sales channel, where, as Rowan mentioned, it's a toolkit. So we'll have certain dealers say, hey, I want all sales to be picked up at the dealership so I can shake that person's hand and kind of give them the walk around of the vehicle itself and establish such that like when they go through servicing and, they're 4 years down the line and they want to buy a motorcycle for their kid, I'm the person that they think of. So, just because the sale is originated online or some component is brought through the Ekho sales channel doesn't mean you're eroding that customer relationship that, to Rowan's point, has a ton of lifetime value. So, just want to emphasize that still very much is at the core of what we're doing.
Got it. Chris, sticking with you, is you got RV and marine listed on your website. When do you envision the foray into those industries?
Yeah, good question. So we get this question a fair amount from investors and dealerships and manufacturers. The short answer is we're pretty hyper-focused on drilling the power sports use case right now. I will say we're pretty fortunate in a lot of the technology that we've built is already applicable for some of these other vehicle verticals like RV and marine and even auto. So we've started lining up some of those strategic relationships with the lenders and the insurance providers and F&I back-end product providers. A lot of the TNR, for instance, workflows, we've built out this engine that makes it really easy for us to onboard additional vehicle verticals. So when we decide to make that switch, it'll be pretty quick, but it certainly isn't on the immediate roadmap. We're hyper-focused on just drilling power sports and making sure that our product is as good as it can be for the dealerships in this domain.
Yeah, they want it. And you talk about an industry that's desperate for some F&I. It's the marine industry. Holy moly. If you should just open that part of it for marine before you get to the rest of it so everybody can make some money. Let me throw an audible in here before I ask my last question. Chris, I'm going to ask it to you, and Rowan, you can share in that answer. But my audible, Mike, I'm coming to you with this because I'm sitting here thinking about the answer that Rowan really eloquently laid out as to what the benefits are, as opposed to when Tony and I said, I don't know how that makes us feel, kind of a thing. But Rowan, I got to say, when you talked about that I could do as a consumer, I could do the entire transaction at night when the dealership's not closed, or when the dealership's closed and nobody's there to take I could do the entire thing from my living room chair. Tony, you said bourbon and Cheetos, and I was like, I could put those three together in a hurry right now. But I'm wondering, does the old dealer in Mike say, yeah, and I know you're very biased because of where you sit right now, but do you still wrestle with that? Or you're like, no, that's a no-brainer. That's incremental sales only.
To me, it's a no-brainer. I mean, and I'll keep it short, but, we all know that the industry is down some, and the thing that I always focus in on is, are there 10% more people that are sitting over here that are younger, female, or busy as hell and don't necessarily, they know what they want and they would rather do the transaction and pick the vehicle up at the store? Could that fill that void? I would love to learn the answer to that question, but I do believe, and I know in talking to industry experts that, their kids, people are going to their kids that ride to learn more about riding, but they don't, they buy used bikes as opposed to new because they don't want to have that, in-person dealership experience. And just removing the friction that Ekho does for a dealership, it's amazing. I mean, we've had reports where people have bought a motorcycle online in less than 20 minutes, financing and everything, and all the paperwork, everything done, dusted, money collected.
Well, remove friction has been a theme of our 20 clubs for the last year in all of our groups. So we have to find a way to remove the friction. All right, Rowan, let me come back to you with this last question, which is, and Chris alluded to it with, how long until we start playing in powers or RV and marine and stuff like that. But I want you to forecast out to 2030. I mean, you know what? Let me just start with this. You started Ekho in 24. Is that right?
We went live with our first clients at the beginning of 2024. That's right.
So to the listener out there, they went live in 24. They got $17 million of funding in 25. They already have OEMs lined up and dealers using the product right now. This is a crazy question when you put that into context. Where do you see Ekho in 2030?
Yeah, it's an exciting thing to think about. And I think a big part of my role is sitting down every day and figuring out what that is and working with Chris and team to make our way there. My bullish take is I think Ekho by 2030 will be in a good majority of all the power sports and RV and travel trade and non-car dealers across the US and serve as their centralized operating system when it comes to just about everything that dealer does on the variable ops front. So, CRM, sales processing, F&I desking, titling and registration, fraud detection, liability insurance, that whole mess today that is made up of and solved for by a number of different point solutions that, I would argue don't do a great job. All of that exists at the Ekho level. And you're going to see these dealerships just running way tighter ships, higher net profit margins, happier customers, and just healthier dealerships ultimately that are going to live on into the future, selling units.
So I love it. I love the ambitiousness of it. The majority of the power sport dealers out there. Are we playing a marine? Are we playing an RV? Are we there yet by 2030? Or is it just power sports at that point?
Yeah. I mean, I think, we've raised a lot of money, like you mentioned, Sam. So we've got a lot of firepower. We're hiring out a world-class team as we speak. We went from, being 7 people not long ago to being close to 30 today. And with those people and with the foundation we have, being able to expand across vehicle verticals, but also just deepening our stack and eating away at some of these other point solutions is totally attainable. Yeah.
Exciting, man.
Yeah. Super
it's exciting. Tony, I look at this again from a consumer, from a dealer, from an OEM, and I can see people getting excited on all different levels for this.
Yeah, fascinating product. It's going to be interesting to see the trajectory here, guys. So I can't thank you guys enough for spending some time with us discussing what you believe might be the future of the power sports industry and taking the time out. So for Rowan Mockler, Mike Cunningham, Chris Howard, Sam Dancer, I'm Tony Gonzalez. This has been GarageCast. Have a fantastic Tuesday, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks guys.